What would it feel like to be free? Do you constantly try and make changes in your life but always slip back into old ways? I used to be constantly frustrated by my lack of willpower. What I never knew is that there was a reason why I could not control myself, and that there are processes that you can follow to regain your freedom. I interview some of the most knowledgeable and compassionate minds talking about breaking all varieties of bad habits and how to actually live a joyful and fulfilling life. Listen to the show and hit subscribe to free yourself from the shackles of the mind. And if you find some benefit, please share it with a friend and let's make the world a better place together. Hi, welcome to the Break the Chain podcast. I'm here today with Frank Hicks. Frank is the founder of Guardians of Our Children Charitable Trust, who work to protect children by helping their parents through the disputes process to reach a peaceful resolution. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think the thing that prompted this podcast, obviously you reached out, which was very kind of you. But another reason why I really wanted to do this is because I often find myself in a situation where I'm talking to people who are in extremely difficult situations through separation involving having children or not having custody of their children, often through mental health related issues or addiction or other reasons. And I find it it's an incredibly difficult situation to speak to and deal with. So I'm hoping that this podcast can be a kind of a resource for anybody who's going through that incredibly difficult situation at the moment. So I'm really grateful that you come on the show today to talk about that. I was wondering if you could please tell us a little bit about Guardians of Our Children and how you started doing that.
Well, my relationship ended back in 2012, and it was more or less a clean break. And we had, I think it was a couple of years before things started to become progressively intense, until eventually 2014 was when we ended up in court. Now that changed everything, obviously, but through our experiences, both myself and the mother of my children, we have a wonderful relationship now. But that experience really highlighted to me how people can so easily lose the plot. You know, I mean, if you haven't lost your mind before family court, then it's, you know, there's a lot that can go on in there that would really push people over the edge, and it does, and it's a lot of it's unnecessary. It's our own perception, and we put ourselves under a lot of pressure unnecessarily going through the process. And it's a horrible process to go through, but there has to be a process if both parents aren't going to agree. So when and I was in there for about 19 months before we finally got to the end of it. And even then there was quite a number of months afterwards before we finally sort of settled down to where we are now. And I was able to look back and pretty much plot, and I did. I drew up a graph, a chart, flow chart. I don't know why I did that, but I did that just to see where I'd been through the process. I was able to look back and see what my options were, and I thought, gosh, it was actually quite simple. But you didn't know that at the time. I had no idea. Even though some people were explaining it to me, lawyers were explaining things to me, and it was just, I didn't quite get it. And it wasn't until afterwards that it all started to come together. And what frustrated me was it wasn't explained to me in a way that I could understand it. You know, and it, like I said, a lot of people were trying to explain it to me, but it was just not in a way that I could relate to. So the Guardians was set up specifically for that. We help both mums, dads, a number of grandparents, guardians, anybody who are going through parental disputes or guardianship disputes, and either privately or through the court system, and we just guide them through it. We don't give. I'm fortunate now. There's a number of lawyers who help us out, but I didn't know any lawyers before this. And as I say, it's once people understand it, where they are, the pressure just dissipates. It's incredible, and they can deal with it. Like I said, a lot of the pressure is just so unnecessary.
You said a lot of it can be avoided. What can you do to avoid getting into? I mean, what is it that can be avoided? Going into the courts in the first place, or the stress?
Well, that's it. I mean, when parents are in disputes, children are in the middle, and the best way forward is for both parents to agree, and then both make an application into court for a parenting order. That could be done within weeks, but most parents don't do that. They're so caught up in the anger and the hatred, all sorts of negative feelings, that it's overshadowed their love for the children. And so even though it's pretty obvious what should be done, they just won't do that. And it's unfortunate, because now they've got to go through the process, which could go on for years, and they'll have to leave it then for a judge to decide. And the judge doesn't quite know a judge-made order invariably doesn't quite work, in practice, because they don't know the intricacies of your relationships and your routine and the children's routine and the other parents' routine and all the works, everything that comes into play in the day-to-day living. So they're just going to put an order out there and say, well, there you go, now, get on with it. And so now you have to follow this order to the letter, and it just doesn't work. Invariably doesn't work. And I've had a judge say that to me, it didn't quite work, and say, well, apologize for it. So cool, we'll just change it. But it's the easiest way out is to simply, for both parents to sit down, get over whatever happened in the past, and just make a plan moving forward. And that means you're just going to have to make concessions on both sides. And it only takes one to say, no, I'm not doing that. And then you're down the path, and you've got to go through the process. And, but you were saying, so that's one way, that's the best way to avoid it. But if you're going to go through the process, one of the other things is that the intense pressure of the court process, especially, within the first 3 months when you've been served documents, someone turns up on your doorstep and they hand you papers, and you've maybe got 3 days to respond, right? And straight away, the whole world just caves in. The papers, you may be served on a Friday. You got 3 days to respond. There's no way you're going to get a lawyer in that time, right? Over the weekend. And so in your mind, you're thinking it's just game over. I mean, what can we do? It's all over. I'm not going to be able to respond in time. So I've lost my children. I've lost everything. It's just the whole world's going to come to an end as far as you're concerned. But, having been through it, and, what I know now, all you need to do is just simply, you just call the courts. If you can get there before 5 o'clock, and just call them and say, hey, listen, I don't have time to get a lawyer yet, but could I just have an extension? So I can find a lawyer to get stuck on the paperwork. And often they'll just say, yeah, sure, no worries. Is that all it was? Just one phone call, and whereas if you didn't make that phone call, if you didn't know to make the phone call, and nobody was there to tell you that you could get an extension, then for the next 2-3 nights, you'd just be beside yourself, panic, and a lot of the time, what I feel happens is that when people are served, the respondents, there's that first 3 months where it's just so intense, and if they're not aware of certain fundamental of the dispute process, and things like making just a phone call to the courts asking for extra time, those sort of things. If they're not aware of that, then they are just going, they've put themselves under so much pressure, and invariably a number of them would do something even worse. Sets them down a completely different path. So already, if you've been served with papers in family court, then it would likely be the Care of Children Act. So you're there already in court under the Care of Children Act, probably the Family Violence Act, so that's a protection order as well. But if in that 3 night, over that weekend when you've completely lost your mind because you don't know what to do, you could just get on the drink, drugs, or just completely lose the plot and do something else, and now you're under Crimes Act just over that because of the lack of knowledge. Once you've done something, you've hurt someone else, you hurt yourself, you've just created a whole different pathway, when if you just kept it simple and stayed on the Care of Children Act, then that you can deal with. But like I said, because of the lack of knowledge, a lot of people are just heading down different paths, unnecessarily creating more and more drama. That makes it really hard to recover from.
It sounds like getting some advice from someone like yourself is a really, really good idea, just to make it a little bit less scary, because I imagine, I have no idea. Everything that I know about this is speculative and only based on the experiences that people have told me about themselves. But it sounds like it's such a scary process. The thoughts going through your head, like I'm going to lose my children, or I'm not going to be able to see them anymore. That must be a terrifying thought that makes people act quite irrationally.
Absolutely. It's and protection orders is. I had a protection order for 3 years, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's a horrible thing to have. But what I do know now, having been through it, is that it's nowhere near as bad as people think it is, and you can make it out to be a lot worse than it really is. And the and you're right, when you get that. When you get those documents, the first thing that's going through your mind is, I can't see my children. When will I ever see? Will I ever see them again? I've no idea. You have no idea. But I can tell you now that, if you get that, you will see them again. It's just a matter of question of when, and it's also a question of how well you conduct yourself from that point on. When you've received your paperwork, now you can completely lose the plot and dig a deeper hole for yourself, which means it's going to take you even longer to get out. Or you can just take the paperwork and now educate yourself. Find people that can help you. I don't give any legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a parent helping other parents out. Other guardians. If people want lawyers, legal advice, then we always recommend people go to community law centres. But of course, if you've been served documents at 4 o'clock and 5 p.m., the law centres are closed at 5 p.m. and there's no way you're going to be able to speak to a lawyer unless you know someone who knows someone who might be able to put you in touch with a lawyer over the weekend. But for most of us, we don't have that. So it's important to surround yourself very quickly with the right people. But with the protection order in particular, it can be a blessing in disguise, and it was for me. And the reason why it is there is to stop the conflict, right? And the moment it's served, then that is it. There's no more emails and text messages, phone calls, and it's not just from between the parents. It's from other people involved, who are trying to be involved in it when they shouldn't be involved in it. So once the protection order is served, then all of that is gone. It's just stopped the conflict dead in its track now, which is a brilliant thing, because now you're able to finally to start building your case in peace. And that's what we want. It's hard to build your case when, there's just so much going on all around you. Just you're having to respond to this, having to respond to that. The communication is just endless. But once that's gone, and it now gives you the ability to build your case in peace. Now, you've got two options, really. When you are served these documents, you can either do that, just start educating yourself, go to the community law centres, talking to psychologists and counsellors, go into the Davis Law Library. I used to go there every second Sunday at Auckland University in the family law section, just trying to read a lot of this stuff. And I was only able to do that because I had so much time on my hands now because I didn't have the children, right? So a lot of that pressure was gone. Whereas at the same time, the other parent who might have the children would actually also be struggling for very different reasons, because now they've got the children full time, and it's really, really hard. Whereas before it was all shared care, it gave them time to do their own things when the children were going back and forth. But when they've got the children full time, well, that's a different story now. It's the pressure becomes pretty obvious. So they've got pressure on their end. You've got pressure on your end, but for very different reasons. But most people, when they're faced with that option, having had a protection order, they use it. They don't use it at all very wisely. The time that they've got, instead, they would. A lot of them would just, understandably, just lose it. Would just. The mind start playing tricks on them and all sorts of things, and then there's a whole lot of different paths that they may go down. Like I said, the addiction, or get caught up with the wrong group, and next thing you know, they've said and done something which they shouldn't have done under a protection order, and now they're into criminal court. So they've wasted the opportunity. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I guess that is an amazing opportunity to get all that time. One thing that you said when we spoke previously is a case has to be based on logic and not on emotions. And I guess it's quite hard to pull yourself back from them emotions, but given that space, you do get time to potentially get to kind of rein the emotions in so that you can look at things clearly. But like you say, maybe you need some help to do that also.
Oh, absolutely. I've never been a big on counselling up until I went through family court, and having seen what I've seen, the number of people that I deal with, everybody going through family court and the children are traumatized. There's just no two ways about it. Whether you're the applicant or the respondent, both traumatized, and their extended family, because they've just, it's just so negative. And the children, of course, are deeply traumatized by this. And the longer it goes on for, the more the trauma. But the damage that trauma does. So, which is why it's so important to find counsellors who have experience in family court. And I know a number of good ones, and I always recommend people touch base with these counsellors, as much as they talk to their lawyers. It's hugely important, because there's a lot of healing that needs to be done before they can even sort of come to grips with the disputes process. They do need to do a lot of counselling, and just find that time to be able to heal themselves. Because the emotions is just the number one factor that just, with family court, there's just no avoiding it, and it's just a horrible thing where so much logic goes out the window. It's incredible when you're reading different people's affidavits and the other person who's reading it saying that's just a lie. It doesn't make sense, because in previous in previous affidavit, or even in the same affidavit, they contradicted themselves. So there's the logic and reason just goes out the window completely, and it's all because of the emotions, and which is why a lot of lawyers that I've spoken to really reluctant to deal with family court because of the emotional aspect of it. It's just wouldn't be worth the effort. It's they'll make a hell of a lot more money working in criminal court, and where there's a lot less of that.
It kind of like is a counselling realm. It's where you've got to really care about people to go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see how anyone can get through the family court without counsellors. It's hugely important, especially if there's addiction issues, and that's just because that adds a whole nother level of complexity to this, because it's not something that can be. I've never really had any experience in that at all. I do know when I went through it, I actually made it. I wrote it up on the wall in my old place, and I was there myself. It was going to be, it was no lawyers, no drugs, no alcohol, no violence, no lies, and I didn't know anything else. But I just put that up there, and I was thinking, if I just stick to this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be okay. And I failed on two of them, actually. One is I had to get a lawyer, and the other was the violence, no violence. And the reason being was I didn't know what the definition of domestic violence was. I thought, well, clearly, if you hit someone, it's violence. Well, I've never done that. So therefore, I hadn't committed any domestic violence on my part. But having read through the Domestic Violence Act, which is now the Family Violence Act, under the definition of family violence, particularly psychological abuse, if by the time we read it, we're not lawyers, but by the time anyone else reads it, it's probably too late. You've already got a protection order on you. So any chance I get to talk to people who haven't had a protection order on them yet, I get them to read the Family Violence Act, particularly the section defining psychological abuse, because that tells you how easy it is to get a protection order on yourself. Once you get a protection order, that means now we're talking about supervised contact. That's the only way you're going to be able to see the children is through supervised contact, and that's just a horrible thing to have. So when people realize that, how easy it is to get one, then they'll be very careful of what they say and do.
Do you know roughly what the definition is of psychological violence?
Well, they've got a it's the perception of the applicant, and it's I don't know what section those words are, but from threatening behaviour, if the applicant perceives it to be threatening behaviour, and it could just be raising your voice, just in an everyday situation in any household, the partners are raising their voice to each other, and it might just be, you might just off the cuff joke to your partner, right? And it's funny. And she thinks it's funny. But the next day, something happens at work and she's not in a good mood, and you say the same thing in the same way, but this time around, it's not funny, right? And she'll just say, no, cut it out. That's not funny. You do it again. Well, believe it or not, now you're starting to psychologically abuse her. So it's so broad, the definition of psychological abuse. So you don't have to touch them to have committed domestic violence or family violence on each other. So by that definition, pretty much every householder in New Zealand is committing domestic violence. Yeah. But the only difference is that when you break up, or when enough's enough, and say, stop, don't talk to me like that. You've given them a warning, and if they carry on doing it, well, now you're starting to, you're skating on very thin ice here because you've been warned. just watch your words. But if there's a pattern there, well, now it's just a simple filling in a form for domestic violence, and it's done. It's that easy. It changes your life forever.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the ideal is that couples work through their problems and don't go through this process at all, but it's inevitable, especially in this day and age, that people do break up, and it's very common. And when people do, what's the ideal situation for parents who have separated?
Well, the flowchart that I drew up, having been through it, the best way to do it is to just, if at all possible, is just to sit down with the two parents, sit down, preferably with one other, a mediator. And, then there's the family disputes resolution services all over the place now, or if you want to use someone else, that's fine. But preferably someone who's familiar with parenting orders and can sit you down and say, okay, what's your ideal care structure with the children? And it may be that, let's say the dad said, well, I'm working these hours, so I can't do equal shared care, but I could do, every 3 nights a week kind of thing. So then the mother might say, well, yeah, that's going to make it a little bit difficult for me, but I'll try and make that work, so that the mother now gets every 4 nights. And say, well, we'll see how that goes, and we'll put that down in an order, and you can type it all up. Now, I do mediate sometimes. That's exactly what we do. I've had parents come over, and I'll just we'll put it up on the projector screen, and we'll just try and come up with a structure that would work for the parents and the children. And that could take, that whole thing could, from the time they turn up to the time we finally have got a parenting proposal, it could be 6 hours, 7 hours, and then the application's filled in, the affidavits are done, and then I would print them both out for them and say, listen, you want to take this to a lawyer, you can take it to anyone you want, but preferably a family court lawyer. You take it to your family court lawyer or someone that you know who can help you out, and if you're still happy with that, then take it to court. And that both of you just turn up to the court with your paperwork, and you'll have to pay the courts $220, I think it is, and hand that over, and that's it. It's done. But the courts will, and I've done that a number of times now, and I don't charge for those things, but the number of times that parents have gone to the courts with the parenting order by consent, right, and all it cost them was $220, and maybe, as I say, 6-7 hours of sitting there trying to bang it all into shape, and then it gets filed into court, and if they're lucky, they'll get the order back in an email a couple of weeks later. Or it could be that the judge will think, I'm not too sure about this. It's just very rare for this to happen. I just want to make sure that I'm satisfied that that this is all legit. There's nobody was being put under pressure here to come to this agreement. So the judge may ask for a directions conference just to see both parents, and that's fine. And then there'll be a court date, and they both turn up, and the judge will say, well, this is fantastic, but how did you come to this? And so, well, we just sort of sat down with a friend, and we came up with this idea, and we've been doing this now for the last 3 weeks while we've been waiting for this court date. And luckily we've had that 3 weeks, because we've noticed that a couple of things isn't quite right. So we want to just try and tweak it a little bit, but we're still very happy with the arrangement. And then the judge will be there. Well, that's fantastic. That's the other thing that could happen. That's the best way.
How much faster and cleaner and less traumatic is that process?
Well, the family court in general could take years, right? It could take a couple of years. It could take a number of years. But that process, the quickest that I've been involved with, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was 3 weeks.
Wow.
From the time I met the dad, and then he contacted the mother, and I asked them, are there any orders in place? No orders. I said, but you're still communicating? You don't know where the mother is? I don't know where she's gone with our son. I said, well, if you're still communicating with her, then ask her if she'd be open to meeting up with me. She can bring anyone she wants. She can bring a lawyer if she wants, and we'll just come over. We'll just do a mediation at my place, and we'll just go through all of this. And I think she contacted me maybe a week or so later, and we went through the whole process, spent a whole Saturday doing that. We had a break every so often had a coffee and smoke, and the other one of them had a smoke and a chat, and just to chill a little bit, and then we got back into it. And she had brought her support person, but and then they filed it about a week after that. So I think it was about 3 weeks.
Wow, that's fast. What do you do when someone's completely unreasonable?
Well, there's really not much you can do except not get caught up in for the other. Say if I'm sort of helping someone, and what they're saying is that the other parent is being totally unreasonable, and just sort of dragging the process on. Best thing you can do is just for them is not get caught up in doing that as well. Just to remain cool and calm and logical and reasonable. And the family courts can go on for a long time, as I say, but there is a good side to that, is that once the paperwork is filed to initiate the court process, and let's say you're the respondent, so they've filed papers against you, and you've been handed those papers, you're reading through them, and quite often people will say, well, that's not true, and that's not true, and that's not true, blah, blah. They're just making all this up and so on. And the idea is that, and I can totally understand why a judge would have to make an order without notice. The applications are without notice. That means no one else knew about it. It was just the order was made within hours of the application being made, and the idea is that the judge has nothing else to go by other than what was written there. And the judges, I would think they would have to make a decision and err on the side of caution, because they don't know if what's being said is true. They hope that it's not, but it's an affidavit. They've sworn that it's true, so they've got to take them at their word, and they want to make sure that the situation doesn't escalate. So they make the order. There you've got it. Now you've got the beauty now is that you might have 3 months or so where you can start building your case, right? And the other paperwork starts coming in, and as it goes, the longer the court case goes on for, the more it becomes obvious which party is the unreasonable one. And so eventually, when you do get to court, when they get their first paperwork, nobody knows. Well, they're assuming that the applicant was telling the truth and it was fair and reasonable. But as it goes on, it becomes evident to everybody involved who is the one that's causing a lot of the trouble. And it may even be both parents. But if you just stay, don't get caught up in that, then it'll become evident to the judge eventually, or hopefully, who is the one that's being unreasonable. And that's the only really good thing about the court case being so long. If it was all over and done with very quickly, then you won't actually get to see that, which is why I think a lot of the reasons why the family courts goes on for longer for quite long periods, because it gives them opportunities to see who the troublemakers are.
Yeah.
And it may be both parents.
I always wondered why it took so long. It's a painfully long process, and it sounds like just being patient and having forbearance in that situation is something there's no quick answer to getting through those situations, and like you say, not making it worse. Whatever you do, don't make it worse by letting emotions take over.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've helped a number of parents get through it very quickly. I mean, the sooner you can from when they break up, if you can get involved at that point, then you can hopefully get an order very quickly. And then, like as I was explaining before, and the judge may ask for a directions conference to just look the parents in the eye and just double check and be satisfied that this agreement that they came up with, they broke up 3 weeks ago or whatever, and now they've come this so quickly to courts, and they've trying to convince the judge that everything's okay, we've got it all sorted. So the judge will have to look them in the eye and be satisfied. Yeah, now these two are legit. I'm satisfied with what they're doing. From when I questioned the mother, she seems good. I questioned the dad, he seems good. So I'm satisfied. Boom, and it's done. But there are other cases where there's been so much trouble all the way through the court process. All of a sudden they say, no, we're good now. And, and everybody could just look and see, well, no, I mean, this has been their behavior for years. And all of a sudden they're saying that they're good. No, well, what's changed? So it may be that the judge may say, well, I'm not really satisfied that you have, you're genuine in your attempt here, so we're going to keep going through this. We need you to, would like you to do this counselling program or whatever, and then they'll be satisfied that the measures have been put in place for the betterment of the children. Yeah, because it's always about the children's. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously the well-being of the children is the most important thing. And can you talk about the two different styles of parenting? You talked about co-parenting and parallel parenting. What's the difference between those two things, and which is going to be better for the children?
The parallel parenting is usually when people break up, families break up, and mum doesn't want to have anything to do with dad doesn't want to have anything to do with mum, and the children still got to go back and forth. And so the rules that are at mum's place isn't, that's just the way it is over there, and whatever happens at dad's place is just, that's how it is, and there's very little communication between the two of them. So that's parallel parenting. And it's only ever supposed to be a temporary measure when you break up, to try and get the healing you need, so that eventually you become, there's more communication, and ideally what you want is for both parents, even though they're separate, two different households, they have a high level of co-parenting. So they're communicating every day, text messaging, emailing. It's all about the children. What are they going to do? Who's going to go to school? Are you going to the assembly? If you're not, if you're going to the assembly, can you please record it for me? And that sort of stuff. That's the communication for co-parenting. Now, I'm very fortunate with my, with the mother of my children. That's how we've been for years now. We have a wonderful relationship post court, and that's the whole point, I feel, of the court, is you're asking the courts to help you get to that level, right? And to get to that level, this is the parenting proposal that you want the courts to make, that will then put everything in place after the court process, that you can carry on and eventually become have a high level of co-parenting. That's the best way. That's the second best thing for the children. Well, the best thing is for the parents to be together. But if they're not going to be together, then so be it. But if they're not going to be together, then at least have a high level of co-parenting. My children love it. They absolutely love it. I mean, their mother was the coach of their netball team, my daughter's netball team. She's I better get this right because she keeps correcting me. She's 10, and I sort of help out in the background. They're most Saturdays help just cheering her on and help out with organising a few things. And then I'm also coach of our son, who's 12, his basketball team. school basketball team, and their mother is the manager. So we're always on the sideline, just watching our children play. And it's just a wonderful thing. People think we're together. We're not together, but we have a high level of co-parenting. It's such a joy for the children to see that, and that's what should be happening.
It must be incredibly challenging if you're going from one environment with a certain set of rules and then you go to another one, and then knowing that you can get away with more here, and you start playing the parents against each other, and the kids tell you that this happened there and can I do this, and then as a parent worrying that if it's more fun at the other place that they'll like you less, and so you want to, and it's hard to keep those boundaries in place to do what's actually good for the children long term. It must be so complicated.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the issue, especially when you're going through family court. Is that and you are the respondent, so you've especially if you have a protection order, because you have to change, whether you like it or not. You have to adapt your parenting style to that environment now, because. With protection orders, especially with supervised contact, there's no photos to be taken. There's no gifts to be given to the children. You can't. You have to be careful hugging them. You can't. Everything you say has to be within earshot of the supervisor, and so it's not even parenting. It's but what they're trying to do in that is they're trying to prevent any sort of mind games going on. Like, hey, when you come home, we're gonna go camping, that sort of stuff, and which in a normal everyday scenario outside of court, it's perfectly fine. That's what you would do. You just say, hey, when you come back, we'll go skiing, or we'll go do this, that, and the other. But when you're going through family court, you can't say any of that. Because now it's I think what the psych would call it is parental alliance, where you're trying to, as you were describing, you're trying to entice the children over to you by waving things in front of them, which a PS4. Hey, we'll get a PS4. We'll go do this. We'll go do that. And so they want to come to you. You can't do any of that when you're going through the disputes process, because it's as I say, it will be used against you. It's a horrible thing when you can't even say those things, and you don't know how long this process is going to go for. I mean, if it goes for years and you can't say those things, well, how are you supposed to parent? The children will naturally then want to go to where it's easier. Because especially as a father, our role is not so much to keep them happy. It's about trying to sort of teach them to handle adversity, as well as being happy. But you're teaching them a whole lot of stuff, and it's not. Sometimes it's fun stuff, but other times, most times it's just boring stuff. So, and if you're trying to do that and they can do whatever they want at the other parent's place, well, then, why would they come?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they know, and of course the argument is that it is in the children's best interest that they know these things. So that's why you got to do that. It's not about making them happy. It's just about it's what's in their best interests.
Yeah, I would certainly have chose the place that let me eat chocolate and play Xbox over the place that was going to give me discipline. So that must be so hard to really take, be mindful of the child's interest long term. It must be so difficult, and I'm sure, many situations, unfortunately, the children can be used, as weapons to hurt the other person. And I'm sure when it comes to breakups, there's a lot of circumstances have happened where it's, a lot of anger towards the other person, and I guess that something that over time is required is that there would have to be some level of forgiveness towards the other parent for the sake, not even if it's kind of impossible, but for the sake of the children, so that, not holding on to that anger.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any chance of moving on if you don't if you're not able to forgive other people for what's happened, or even forgive yourself, especially, I mean, no one's blameless in this. I know what I did wrong, and I've sort of owned up to that and accepted that and done what I can to make sure that it would never happen again. But we're all traumatized, and that's where the counselling comes in as well. Being able to speak to people who know how to help you heal. I can only provide the guidance that I do, but that's not counselling. That's just from one parent to another. So it's really, 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 really important to find counsellors who know their stuff when it comes to family court and children. A lot of the damage is you won't see for years later.
Yeah.
Especially with the children.
Do you feel like there was part of the whole process was you doing a lot of personal work, and that was actually that work that you did on yourself was a huge contribution towards finding a resolution?
Yeah. It was. I did a lot of. I didn't really pay much attention to other cases when I was going through mine. I was just fully focused on mine, and what I did to try and look after myself was keep myself busy. But even then, you can only keep yourself busy for so long. You still got to go home to an empty house and lie in bed, and that's when it's going to get you, most times. But it was just the education, just talking to. I was fortunate enough to come across some really, really good people who have been in and around this area for a long time, and and I met professionals, and they were able to help me not just in their capacity as professionals, lawyers and psychologists, but also from one parent to another. And that's where it really connected, was when they'll be writing something down and said, and explaining things from a professional's perspective, and then they just put the notepad down, look you in the eye, one parent to another, and say, listen, you really need to be able to do this. You need to do that. You need to do this. And I'm right. Okay. Now they're speaking a different language. They're telling you things from a parent's perspective, but with the background knowledge that they have in their profession. It adds a whole new dimension to the help that they're able to provide.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of my personal development came from, and once I cottoned on to the process, because the process is a different thing again, the family court process. Once you're familiar with that, and you've got you've done some of your own healing, you're kind of heading towards a better understanding of not just the family court, but the healing process for yourself and everyone else. Once you kind of got a good grip with that, then it makes it so much easier to get through it. The end becomes inevitable.
Yeah. Easier to manage your own life and your own emotions, and then that makes it better for the people around you, and then easier to cooperate with the other parent, and probably have a better relationship with your children as well when it happens again. And it sounds.
And it's also important, as those people were in my own personal development. It also became apparent the people who weren't helping, who initially I thought may have been helping. But as you go through the process, you realize that that they're not actually as helpful as as you thought they were. And that's cool because, it's all part of the journey. And so you can just sever your ties with them or to sort of keep them at a distance. And, but you're very selective of who you have around you. And a lot of them, I know with my own journey, others had recommended I do this, that, and the other. And but by doing so, I knew, even though I would have had every right to do something, that what they had advised me to do, I could not see how that was going to benefit my children in the long run. Mm. It may have been beneficial for me personally in the short term, but it was never about that. It was always how do I get to a high level of co-parenting, which I know my children will thrive in. And so I went against a lot of that advice. Yeah. So but you'll know as you go, when you open yourselves up to what's around you, pay attention to what's going on around you and read between the lines and all of that.
One scenario that I imagined very difficult is when a parent has a new partner, especially if the new partner doesn't like the ex and the mother of the children, and then all kinds of mind games can go on there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of cases fall apart. If people are left to their own devices, the parents are left to their own devices, I think most of them can come to a reasonable outcome, and then then take it a step further for a parenting order by consent and pay the money and get on with it. But you're absolutely right. The number of people I've helped now where the third party got involved, someone else got involved, and the whole thing just fell apart, and which is why I always recommend, and I say to people, if you have broken up, if you think you can handle it, then great. But as soon as another partner becomes involved in this, the dynamics are going to change quite considerably. Mm-hmm. And especially if that partner has children, because now they're going to try and marry up the contact with your children with their children, which is all fine and good if it's not going to change your scenario, your work schedule, and if you're not having now to make even more concessions now to accommodate a third person. Yeah, it just makes it too hard. So it's always best, I find, if you're going to break up, is just come up with a parenting order by consent where that will hopefully secure your contact. And so when someone else comes involved, well, now they have to discuss with you if you want to change it. And you say, well, no, I can't change it, because I've got this on these nights, and I do this on the other night, so I can't change anything. It has to stay the way it is. Whereas if you don't have that order in place, well, then people can just change it how they want. And now you're in the process, and you could be in there for a long time.
I guess by the time people get to you, they've already broken up. What do you think couples can do to potentially prevent that from happening in the first place?
It's just if they've got children, it's so important to have time to themselves. If they can get a babysitter for the weekend and just go away and spend some good quality time with just by themselves, and just enjoy life as it was before they had children. If you can just get a couple of nights away somewhere, it's just fantastic. And do that every now and again. Look after yourselves. Just treat, just get out there and, and just really try and appreciate each other. I know it's so hard when you have children, but it would just to reignite that fire within, and with towards each other. Otherwise, it just becomes, you just don't see how all of these the dynamics of your relationship is changing because you're so focused on trying to keep the family together, when in actual fact a lot of the cracks are starting to appear and you're not recognizing it. And when you do recognize it, you start snipping, making snide remarks and or these, and it just keeps getting worse. So it's just so important to just try and spend some time together, just not a date night, but actually go out for a weekend together.
Even actually just focus on the other person, give them your attention. It's so hard, when everything's going on, just to actually take your attention and give it to your partner.
Yeah. I mean, when I was working, it was work became my break from the children, and because it was just so intense. There were two young children, and when my daughter, the younger one, started to crawl, oh man, that's when it just really got crazy, because now they're both moving. One's going this direction, the other's going that direction. I'm going, and it's. And you're having to move everything on the shelves and the cupboards just a couple of inches back every couple of weeks,
Yeah.
And the 0800 poison line. Oh my God, yeah, it's me again. They've just just taken a swig of this. What do I need to do here? And then you're having to move all of that up. And it's just as they, when they start moving, that's when it just gets really, really intense, and it's non-stop. And any sleep I can get would be fantastic, because I alternated with their mother when she was working, and I'd have the children, then she'd be home, and then I'd go to work. And so work became my rest period. So it's pretty full on having having more than one child anyway, but that's a lot of fun. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. I guess if someone was to bring up the idea of something like family counselling, it could almost come across as offensive, or you might get defensive over something like that. I've seen that personally in people close to me, and one of them takes it as one says, "Oh, why don't we go and do this?" and the other one's just like totally offended or blaming the other person, saying it's not my fault, it's your fault, it's not my problem, I'm fine. But something like that can just prevent such a headache in the future.
Well, absolutely. Funnily enough, that was what my ex had proposed. Very early on. Well, shall we get counselling? He said, I don't need counselling. Well, we don't. What do we need counselling for? But that was a hint and a half. Yeah. I should have taken it at the time, because if that isn't a clear sign that things are falling apart, then I don't know what is. So if ever couples in a situation where one says to the other, "Hey, should we get some counselling?" then damn well take it, man, because within months you'll be in family court. Yeah.
I don't know if that's always the rule, but that's certainly what I've observed in situations that I've seen. So it's possibly a true theory.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if they're not in family court, they'll be close to it. Yeah. But it's and like I said, I've never been big on counselling, but prior to family court, now I recommend it, because there's a lot of trauma that needs healing, and we're all grieving at the loss of our relationship, our loss of our relationship with our children. And it's not like they've passed away or anything where it's final. They could be just 2 suburbs over, and you can't go anywhere near them. And it's just, and you don't know if you will ever will. And that's just, that kind of grief is just ongoing. It's just torture. But when you find the right people who can speak to you and show you that it's actually, the path is quite predictable, and if you take this approach to it, then you're going to reach the conclusion a lot quicker in terms of the courts, and you're asking the courts for help to get you to a point where you could co-parent after the court proceedings. I think that's what a lot of people should be using the courts for. Instead, a lot of them, from what I've seen, are using it to just inflict as much damage on the other parent as they possibly can.
Yeah. So I was doing some research for this interview, and I went on verywellfamily.com, and I pulled up some of the statistics and stuff, and they had on there, and just because I was just looking, obviously, looking at the effect that this has on children. So young children often struggle to understand why they must go between two homes. They may worry that if their parents can stop loving one another, that someday their parents may stop loving them. Primary school age kids, school children, may worry that the divorce is their own fault. They may fear they have misbehaved, or that they may assume they did something wrong. And teenagers may become quite angry about a divorce and the changes it creates. They may blame one parent for the dissolution of the marriage, or they may resent one or both parents for the upheaval of the family. In some cases, they might feel relieved if it's been a really extreme situation, but these are some of the, when we think about trauma and some of the situations that we take into our adult lives, and, the effect that this can have on children is just huge, isn't it?
Absolutely. And with the younger ones, because when you're going through family court, obviously, then you don't want to be talking to the children about any of that sort of stuff. And so, especially with preschool children, there's 1 minute you're there, the next minute you're gone. And they don't know why. And they may be told that, well, he's working, or mum's just gone off to be with auntie for a little while, and then how long is that little while? It's become a long while now, and so what you don't want is for those children to start developing abandonment issues, because as you were saying, I thought, you put yourself in their shoes, in the children's shoes. They loved you. They were doing everything for you. They were playing with you. Everything was fine, and then they're gone. Where do they go? Why isn't? I keep asking, and they might be asking mum or dad, where's mum or dad gone? And they've been given all these different excuses. Even the young ones eventually will think, okay, how many more excuses do you want to give us? Something's happening here, and they don't know. And if they start to think that you've left them, then, as you're saying, do they still love me? As a child, they were going to be asking that question, and that's just it changes everything. And especially so if you have a protection order, because you can't do the things that you want to do with them. Even hugging them. And you might have a supervisor say, no, you can't do that. Just out of sight from the child, so the child doesn't see, no, don't do that. And so now you can't hug your child, and your child wants to hug you. What are you going to do? If the child comes to hug, you're going to hug them. All right. And then you have to deal with the consequences later on when it's brought up. If you can't follow orders, you were told this is what you can't do, and you did it anyway. And you have to argue over something like that. I wanted to hug my child because she wanted a hug. It's just a horrible thing when for a child who loves their parent, and then and I remember being told. And I know a lot of lawyers would tell their clients, just who have got protection orders, if you see your child anywhere, turn around and walk away. You got to walk away. Otherwise you could be in breach of the protection order, which means now you're in criminal court, which means now you could be looking at jail time. And you just want to keep your case as simple as possible, get to the end of that case, and then have the children back and be able to hug them. So and if you ever see them, what do? You hopefully maybe just disappear before they see you. But if they see you and come running at you for a hug, well,
And what's the child's perception of that? That's devastating, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think most of us would do the same thing. We would rather risk getting phone in prison than walk away from our child who's coming for a hug.
Yeah. If someone's in the devastating position where they have been cut off from their children, what can they do for the absolute best chance of seeing them again?
Well, every case is different. Every case is different, but in the simplest scenario, then and there are no orders in place at all, then the best thing to do is contact the community law centre and ask them to help you out with that, and they would get a form, an application form for contact. You'd have to start the process. There's no way around it. You can ask all you want, email all you want, or can I see the children, and then just hope like hell that you'll get to see the children. But even then, it may be just whenever they feel like it. Well, that's just not good enough. How are you going to parent? How can you develop a relationship with the children under those sort of conditions? So you would have to make an application into court. So that's where, as I say, community law centres, or if you you don't qualify for legal aid and you have to do this on your own, then just call the courts up, 0800 courts, and just ask them, could you please email me the application form for a new parenting order, and then give me your email address, and it'll turn up in your inbox, a few minutes later, and then you can just try and work out how to fill it in, and you can even call them. They will help you out. They might help you out. The court registers. If you turn up there, they might help you out filling it in, or they'll probably say go to a community law centre, and you can do that as well. But they're not that hard to do. But it's really, really important to get the process going. The sooner you start, the sooner you get to the end. And obviously, the other parent will say, "Oh, now you're just taking us to court." I said, "Well, I had no option. We want to. I want to be involved with the children's lives. I know I'm a good role model for them. I'm a positive experience in their lives, so I want to be there. So I'm making an application, and this is what I'm asking for. And if you don't want to agree to that, then we're just going to have to carry on through the courts. But it's always good to offer first. Email the other partner, the other parent, to settle the matter privately. Ain't going to happen. Well, let's go. Then the next process is the FDR, Family Disputes Resolution. That's the mediators. And if that falls over, then you've got to go through the court process.
A final thing is, this one is, I guess, obvious and frustrating and extremely, extremely difficult. But when addiction is involved, if you're an addict and you've lost custody of your children or whatever it might be relating to that, what can you do about that? And what's the likelihood of getting custody of your children again while still in active addiction?
Yeah, that's a hard one, eh? That's it's such a hard one, because addiction, as I say, it's only something that I've really become aware of after my case was all over, and dealing with different people, and their story is bad enough as it is, but then when they say, and he's a pee addict, or there's other addictions, gambling and alcohol, then really it makes it so much more complicated, because you can never really force people to get better. It's only when, I guess, they decide themselves that they're going to do it, and it must be so frustrating for them. When I'm reading some of the what they write, it's clear that they want to be with their children. They want to be with their children, and they're doing everything they can to be with their children. But this addiction thing is just, this demon is just making it almost impossible for that to happen. And I've got no answers to that, eh? I mean, all I can do is refer them to, and I know an addiction counselor who's very good. And all I can do is just, I just feel for them. I feel for the children, obviously, because they want to be with their mum or their dad, and this addiction is it can get anybody. Pee and alcohol and anything really, any sort of addiction, but it's just so hard for me, and I feel kind of, like I said, I've helped a lot of people, but the addiction thing is just something that I just, I feel so helpless, and because I just wish I could do something more than refer them to a counsellor, because I can see when you're talking to them face to face, it's just so obvious they want to be with their children, and it's hard enough to go through the process, and to do all of that without the addiction component. But once that's a part of it, it's just like, oh.
It's the most vicious cycle, isn't it? Because you're, potentially sometimes people aren't even addicts when they lose their children, and then because of that they start using, and then it's, you have a painful situation, and then you use a painkiller, and then it just sets your emotion in this extremely vicious cycle where it's kind of like becomes the cause and the problem all at the same time. And yeah, it's to say, like, to get out of the addiction means that you also have to face the pain of the initial, but it's like, if you don't do that at some point, are you ever going to get your children back?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I know, like I was saying before, it's that 3 months period from when you've been served documents, and it's just so intense. And and I believe it's within that 3 months period that things can go pear-shaped very quickly, because it's usually in the 3 months you say, oh, we'll have a court date within 3 months. I said, oh, great. So now we've got an end to go to that we're working towards. And then that'll be our chance to stand up and say our piece. But, so you're heading towards that. And then when you get to that, you realize that it was only a directions conference, and it wasn't actually to decide on the contact or anything. It was more of an administrative thing, and the other parent still doesn't want, still not going to budge on contact. So now it's going to be another 6 months, it's going to be 9 months, and it's that window that keeps extending. Is, from what I can see, that's where a lot of people just, they just, they give up, or they can give up, and or they think it's just too hard. And whereas if you get in early enough within that 3 months period and say, this is what's going to happen in 3 months' time, so that's just part of the process. So what you're working to, you got to be able to work your way to a position where when you get to your final hearing, which may be many, many months down the road, it could even be over a year or so. When you get to that, and we keep asking for progressive contact, then you'll be in a very good position to be able to get what it is that you're after for the children. And then once you explain that to them, then they realize that it's not that bad, and they're less likely, I believe, to turn to drugs and alcohol and to say and do something stupid that would sabotage their case.
Yeah. That knowledge can help to prevent the emotions from taking over.
Absolutely. No, I mean, knowledge is power, and it's and it's being able to explain it in the right way. Like I said, everything that I've sort of come up with guardians of our children, and the workshops that we do, and we do Zoom meetings as well now. All of that, it's not even my stuff. It was just it's pieced together from my discussion with lawyers and judges and counselors and psychologists and lay assistants and parents. Also, parents who addiction problems, just from everywhere. It's all come together, and now we just sort of package it in a way to be able to now explain it. Because when I was like I said, when I was served those documents, right, I'm sitting there, opening it up, and it was just, it may as well have been in Chinese, right? I didn't understand it, but what I needed at that point was someone to walk through the door and say to me, hey, listen, this is what these documents mean. Let's lay it all out. Blah, 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 blah. We'll break it all up. Now, it's pretty simple. This is what you need to be able to do. And your deadline is on this date to do this and to do that. And you got to be able to speak to these people. And I recommend you go to talk to these people. And then you've got an actual plan of attack. If there is no plan, if you don't come up with a plan, then you're just going to be meandering through the whole process, completely lost, with no real direction and no end in sight, and you'll just very quickly lose your mind. Yeah, it's everything that I talk about in the workshops and the Zoom meetings and one-on-one. A lot of it's sort of packaged from my discussions with a lot of the industry professionals, the judges, lawyers, counsellors, court registers, just all of them. And now I just explain it in a way that I wish someone had explained it to me when I was going through this in the beginning. Like I said at the very beginning, a lot of people did already explain this to me, but it wasn't done in a way that I wish they had done. So I make it a point to do that. It's not that hard to understand once it is delivered in the right way, I believe. It doesn't mean that they're doing it all wrong. It's just that they've got other priorities. They've got other things that they need to be able to focus on. Whereas now I can talk to people from one parent to another and explain it in a way that parents can get. And once they understand that, then all the other discussions that they would have then starts to make sense. Discussions with lawyers, with counsellors, and pretty much anyone within the disputes process.
Yeah, I think if one thing that's you've made really clear to me is that there are people out there like you who are running charities and things who really want to see people get through this process efficiently and as painlessly as possible, and that they can actually help guide you through these things. You don't need to be overwhelmed through a lack of knowledge and the unknown and just jumping to all of the worst case scenarios all the time. You can maybe do a little bit of research, find someone who's actually guiding people through this process and get, which makes the process way less overwhelming.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's the real pressure is trying to learn all this yesterday so that you can apply it today, because the children are getting older every day. They don't have time for you to waste wallowing in self-pity. They need you to be getting active into doing what needs to be done to create that environment for them where they can thrive. That's the pressure is trying to. It's a race against the clock, and it's very, very intense. And so, but people can do it. You can do it if you know what needs to be done at the right time. It's doable.
Yeah, and getting some help with that is very important. All right,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about that today. I think it's really important, and I know that for certain people this podcast is going to be unbelievably helpful. So I really am thankful that you've come on the show and spoken to us about this today. Is there anywhere that people can find you online?
Yeah, the website's up, gooc.org.nz. Facebook page also is GOOCNZ. Yeah, and you can touch base through there. But there's help all over the place. If people look, like I said, the community law centres are fantastic. The 0800 courts are very useful. They can direct you. So everything people need to be able to get through this is already there. And I just urge people to just start making moves to better themselves and create that environment for their children.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thanks for coming on here. And I'll put the links for those things in the description if anybody wants to click on that Facebook and your website and stuff. And are there any other, I guess the family law thing and all those things you've recommended. Is there any other specific tools and resources out there that you can recommend?
Well, yeah, there's plenty out there. There's plenty out there for pretty much everybody. What is lacking though is the actual help for the children. There's so much out there for mums and dads and grandparents, right? So we're not short of on that, but in terms of actually helping the children, that's going to come down to the mum and dad and the guardians. So it's where, we got to be able to sort of hug them and hold them and love them and just say to them everything's okay. We're working it out and we love you. And your dad loves you and your mum loves you. Just reassure them that things will be okay.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
No, it was great talking to you, James.
Thanks.
Well done.
Thanks, Frank. Cheers. I hope that you enjoyed the show, and I really appreciate you stopping by. If you found some benefit from listening to this episode, please hit subscribe and share it with anyone that you think might need it, so that we can try to turn the tide on the devastating mental health epidemic that the world is facing. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Break the chain.